lovely Santa Fe number 3751. The grand old bell itself. And yes, this is LA Union Station. And hello, this is Jethro Conductor speaking of the Santa Fe Disneyland Railway, having some time off from Disneyland, of course. Today, we're gonna have a cab tour right inside the locomotive itself, 3751, from Ashton to Pecan and Santa Fe. However, I used to be on the cab before, but it's one of somebody's turn, and you know who. Yes, of course, Mr. Christian Michael Valdez will be joining. Well, he will carry my phone since I permitted him already. So, here we go. His cab tour. For instance, he hasn't been in a long time since he was a little boy.
We just don't let Angel fans in. I'm really not going to be working.
And thank you, Mr. Conductor. I'll take it from there.
So while you're in here, guys, just be real careful. Everything behind me is really hot. So we had the engine fired up this morning. So just don't put any hands over here.
Okay.
You guys feel free to take as many pictures as you want. Please do not pull the white cord over there, but you are all welcome to take turns pulling this one over here. That's the bell cord that rings the bell on the front of the engine. So you guys are standing in the cab of a 1927 built steam locomotive. That means it's 97 years old this year. Everything on this engine is fully operational. It all runs by steam, even down to the electricity for the headlight on the front. All the lights in here when we operate at night, it's all powered by steam. We have a little steam turbine. The air pressure that we have that powers the brakes, all powered by steam. This engine is fully self-sufficient. And in 1927, when it was built, it was probably the pinnacle of steam at that time. And as you know, steam engines were about 1950s is when they were put out of service. So there were other advancements made of steam engines between 27 and when the engine went out of service in the 50s. So for a time, it was the top of its class, but that changed. You know my name, but I'm sure there's a bunch of other people with the same name down there. So it looks really complicated when you guys come up here. But for us who have done this long enough, for the guys who went and did this every day, have 12-hour shifts, I mean, this was their offense. They come up here and muscle memory. It's like when you pull your garage in, or pull your car into your garage at home, and the lights aren't working. You're like, all right, well, I'm in the dark. Open the door to the house. You reach around the corner. You're like, all right, this is for the living room, the kitchen. This is what that is for us. We know what all of these valves do. But before I can open any of these, this is a safety feature. This is called the main fountain. This controls steam to all the other appliances. So before I open any of these, I open this valve. So let's say I open that, I'm ready to start getting the engine ready. One of the next things I do is open this valve here and this valve here. I also move to these two here. These two valves per sight glass you see here control little hard to see, but if you look close, there's a glass tube inside this screen. This is a protective screen in case that tube fails. But these glass tubes tell me how much water is in the boiler, all the way to the front of the boiler. That's really handy because for the fireman who sits over here, his job is to boil the water to make the steam. He needs to know how much water is in the boiler. That all sounds really fun and super easy. But when this engine's going down the track at 70 miles an hour, like it would normally operate at, when it gets out onto the Great Plains, operating between LA and Kansas, this thing's bouncing around. So the water is going like this, and when you're going forward as a motion, it's just like when you hit the gas real hard in your car, you kind of lean back in your seat a little bit. All that water does the same thing. You start moving, comes to the back a little bit, so your water goes up in your glass. On the fireman, oh great, I'm looking good, cool, I got a lot of water. So then you start going up grade, engine tilts back, water comes in the glass a little bit more. That's all great. Then you go over the mountain and you tip over. All that water that was up there goes, oh no, I'm going to the front of the engine now. All of a sudden your water here, down, 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 down. If it drops below this glass, you really need to start putting water in this thing quick. If that water, and you can't see it then, drops below this nut here, same thing for this one over here, there is a crown sheet layer here. That's the top of the firebox. So above all that is the space that we have for the water on the firebox to boil to make the steam. If that's not covered by water, that bare metal is exposed, you will melt that metal. All that boiler pressure you have, it's going to get through that metal and you have a boiler explosion. So we're not going to do that today. So that's if you have not enough water. So the fireman's job is to make sure he has enough water. On the other end, if you're making a lot of steam, there is a safety feature for that, catch you. And this engine, this is a dual-sided pressure gauge. This is our steam gauge. Tells me how much steam I have. We operate at 230 pounds PSI. So if I get up to 230, the first safety valve on this engine, which if you get out and you're on the ground and you look up at the top of the engine, there's big brass valves. Those are 3 different safety valves. First one pops at 230. Next one pops at 232. Next one at 235. So if I get up to 230, first one's gonna go. If I'm really not paying attention and I have a ripping fire in here, 230 is gonna be going off and 232 will start going off. If you get to your third safety valve going off, 235, and the other 2 are still going, you better just jump because something's not right. You should never have 3 safety valves going at once. So they're there though to try and vent the safety or vent the pressure to keep it out of safety for what the boiler is rated for. So those are some safety features that these guys had to know what they were doing. They couldn't dilly-dally. They couldn't, be at their office and be like, well, I just sent you an email with that Excel document. I'm gonna get on Instagram for a little bit. These guys constantly had to be vigilant about what they were doing. If they didn't, someone might die. So we keep that same level of safety and awareness in what we do today. So the fireman's job over here, as we've said, is to boil the water to make the steam. So he has a couple of things to do that. He's got this big valve here. This is the firing valve. That controls how much oil is coming into the firebox, how strong the fire is. The other thing he needs is this little valve over here. It's called the atomizer. So picture a waterfall, but instead of a normal waterfall with just water, picture a 2-tier waterfall. So on the top layer, there's the oil rolling over. That's what this controls. On the bottom layer, there's a little steam jet spray, because if that oil just came out, it's going to splash onto the floor. Well, that's not going to work for us to have a big roaring fire. So what we do is before we open the firing valve and have fuel go in, we turn on our atomizer. So that second nozzle, the second layer, steam jet spray, it starts going. So that way when the oil comes out, it rolls into that jet spray and it vaporizes. If I throw a rag on with kerosene and fire in there, that'll light the vapor and it'll just keep reigniting itself. That flame will fill this whole room up to the top of the firebox that I showed you. The goal of that flame and that heat is to hit the back of the firebox here. There's a big brick wall here. It hits the wall, it rolls over, fills this whole space, and then that heat goes through 300 tubes that are in the boiler. And around those tubes is the water. So as the heat comes through the tubes, they get hot, boils the water, the steam rises into the dome, and then we have steam for the engineer to be able to use. His sole job is to make steam for the engineer to be able to use to move the train. So moving from the fireman, we'll come over to the engineer's side. So what you see over here, we'll start with the brake system. This is called the automatic, or the train brake. This controls the brakes on the entire train. So when people walk up and they see the steam locomotive here, wow, that's a big black train. we kind of joke on the crew because it's not a train. Train is only a train when it has a car behind it. This is just a locomotive by itself right now. So for now, we're just an engine. But if we had one car, or if we had 100 cars behind us, this controls the brakes on all the cars behind us. It's one little lever here. But let's say like right now, the engine's by itself. We just have the locomotive and the tender here that's connected. Then we'll use what's called here the independent brake, because the locomotive is independent of anything else connected to it. So that controls the brakes on here and here. So if we're ready to go, I'm going to take this big red lever here. This is our power reverser. It's run by air. So the air is created from big pumps on the side. Steam moves the pumps, builds up air pressure. Again, this engine is self-sufficient. So I'm ready to go. I'm going to put this forward. So we're going forward the direction that we're going. I'm going to pull the throttle out here. And before I even do that, the engineer looks over at the fireman and says, hey, are you ready to go? Because if these guys aren't having a good day together, they aren't getting along, the amount of suction from when he starts pulling this, the draft will suck the fire out if he's not paying attention. So we have a good operating crew now. Back in the day, they did too. But man, if somebody said something before you got up there, you were going to have a rough day. He could constantly mess with him, or vice versa. He could have the engine not ready to go for him, and then he's going to get pissed off and he's over here laughing. So that happened very rarely, but it did. So we're going to go forward. We're going to pull the throttle back. But before we do that, who here has seen the Polar Express? Yeah? You guys seen when the pin was bouncing around? This is the pin that bounced around. You guys are in the Polar Express. When they made that movie, they're based out here in Southern California, and they needed a steam engine to be able to model things after. So you can imagine who they turned to for that. That engine in that movie was a coal burner, and this engine, when it was originally built in 1927, was also a coal burner. It had a big auger screw that came down, and it pulled all the coal down here. Then there were two big stokers here, so that coal got fed up into the stokers, and the fireman's job was to spray the coal into the firebox into different parts of it, and that's how we burn the coal, make the fire, make the steam. So today, we use reclaimed motor oil. This engine was converted to burn oil in about 1936, and that's when it got its new tender here. And today we truck reclaimed motor oil out of Nevada, and that's what we burn. So when you go to Jiffy Lube, get an oil change, they take that, send it to a third party, they clean it, they strain it, and they sell it for one of the people who buy it. So in theory, we're recycling. That's what we tell them. So there's a steam engine out at the Grand Canyon that actually burns reclaimed vegetable oil. And no kidding, it used to be a joke, and then people actually found out when they went there, it smells like French fries when it goes by. So they're pretty stoked to work on that. Ours does not smell like French fries, so maybe one day we'll get there. But going back to the engineer side, you've got your throttle here, you've got your speedometer, you've got some air gauges here to tell you what your brake system's doing. Again, that these two levers control. Over here is a very important little brass handle that the engineer has. What that does is actually still used on all of the trains that you see out there today. When you guys get outside, take a look at the top of the engine. You'll see a big dome that rises up, and it has hand painted on it, 3751. A lot of people think that's where all the steam rises up and collects, because it's the biggest dome. Well, if you look, that big dome has a lot of pipes that come down. If you follow those pipes, they finally end up going down to the big wheels. Most of them are in front of the wheels. What this does is send air pressure up to that dome, and inside that dome is sand. And it'll force the sand down in front of the wheel, hands on the rail, and if the rails are really slick, if it rained, if there's some other substance on there, it'll stop the wheels from slipping. So that's still used on today's diesels. If you go look at them, the front of the wheels, there's a big pipe that comes down. That's the sand pipe for them too. So kind of neat, technology has changed, but not that much. So that's kind of the basics of what these guys do up here. We have a lot of fun doing this. We're all volunteers again to do this. We're not paid to sit up here for 12 hours like the old guys were, but it's a lot of fun, and we appreciate you guys coming up here to see it. So.
How much oil does it typically take to run it?
That's an excellent question. So this thing holds, I think, 7,100 gallons of oil, 20,000 gallons of water. It'll burn 100 gallons of water per mile. And the fuel rate, I can't remember per mile, but you would probably need to take on more fuel. If we left LA right now with a full tank, probably a car stove we need to take a while. Yeah. And this engine being as old as it is, There's actually more modern steam engines than this one before they stopped making steam engines. What I mean by that is when you get out, look at the big silver rods that the wheels are connected to. Those are actually friction bearing rods. So every 120 miles, even when we run this thing right now, we still have to get the crew out and put alamite grease into a gun and shove it in there, a pressurized gun. There's an engine bigger than this that just got restored in Albuquerque. It's also a steam engine of Santa Fe heritage, and they have roller bearing side rods now, so they don't have to service that thing at all. So our joke is when these two engines eventually meet, they're going to come over and we're going to be the junker, they're going to be the Cadillac. So very cool. Yeah, later Sunday evening we'll take this back to it's stored just down the LA River in the Amtrak yard. That's where we rent some tracks from the truck. Yeah. But she's fully operational. We had a lot of fun yesterday moving her under her own power, and Sunday probably about 7 o'clock we'll have it fired up and we'll back out of here. We'll head back over here.
It's probably a bit of a trip driving this thing, right?
Is there any requirements to get PTC on this thing?
Yes, there is. So that's what this guy is here. Everybody came in here and said, wow, you have PTC? And I go, yep, we have an $8,000 monitor.
Just a monitor. Right?
Just a monitor. So we have our guy working on the brains for it. The gentleman that we work with on our crew, he actually designed PTC for the deploy. Lead TC for them too. And then CP beat UP to full PTC. You saw how quickly UP said, oh, well, we're putting full on the big boy. So we're catching up to them. That's our goal. It'll probably live in this back cabinet here. That's where the brains will be. And then after we even get all $200,000 worth of hardware installed, it comes to testing.
What's PTC?
PTC is positive train control. 2008 was a really bad crash in Chatsworth between a freight train and a Metrolink train. So out of that accident, they said, well, how can we prevent these tragedies from happening again? This will now say on this locomotive, count down, hey, I know what signals you have, I know what territory you're on, I know what your speed is for certain curves, everything. So if you start coming up to a signal that it knows is red, it'll tell you, hey, you're getting close.
Yeah.
A little too close. You're really close. They will put on the brakes.
Okay.
It's gonna move.
So that's a little bit about it. You guys have any other questions?
Do you have questions? No.
I do. How many minutes does it take to inspect this whole steam locomotive?
How many minutes does it take?
Yeah.
Well, on a normal day, when we fire up from a very cold start, it takes this engine between 8 and 10 hours to fully heat up.
Oh, wow.
Wow.
Yeah.
You know, I only have one comment. Long time ago in the 50s, my great uncle named Patrick Egan. He was the inspector of the Santa Fe Railway a long time ago.
Yep. I've heard of Pat many times. All good things.
Oh yeah, Patrick Egan himself.
Yep, Pat Egan.
I don't know if you guys knew him before or.
Oh, I never had a chance to meet Pat. I'm sorry. Somebody waved to me out there.
That's okay.
But a lot of our guys out there did. So maybe ask one of the other guys in the red shirts and they might have moved back.
Of course.
Yeah. Well, with that, guys, I appreciate you coming up.
Yeah, thank
kind of
you.
about our time. If you want to take any pictures before you leave, if you haven't, you're welcome to.
I'll take a one ring of the bell.
Go for it.
Thank you.
Skyler, you want to ring the bell?
I'm sure you can watch your mother there.
Hold on, he's doing it after he's done.
Yeah.
Good job.
Oh, one more question.
Yes, sir.
How many miles per hour does it go?
We usually keep it about 70, but it topped out at 103 miles an hour.
Thank you
That's
very
great.
much.
Thank you, sir.
Appreciate it, yeah.
Appreciate you.
Thank you so much.
Thank you,
Say
sir.
bye-bye. Can we
Appreciate
say
it.
bye?
Thank you. Whew. That was very good. Well, that wraps up for this event. Mr. Conductor, it's all yours. Thank you so much, Mr. Valdez. I really appreciate it. Well, however, I'll see you at Disneyland next Friday, of course. Well, like Mr. Valdez says, it's like a great time for this event. So So, however, be sure you like and subscribe and follow me on Instagram, JethroConductor1933, and follow me on Facebook as well. So, God bless, peace and love.